Fun fact, my anime list has well over 100 anime airing this season alone, and that is not including kids and adult content. I'm sure if you really applied yourself, you could watch it all, but that's if you dedicate all your time to watching anime, and I know nobody has that kind of time on their hands. In practice, this means that with every passing season, more and more works get forgotten to the sands of time, and while I do my best to catch as many as I can, I am not perfect. I mean, I could certainly go back starting in the 60s and sample everything, but where's the fun in that? Like last time, the rules here are simple. I'll use an anime generator to pick 3 random 1 to 2 core shows and give them 3 episodes to see if they're worth my time. There's no restrictions on genre, age, or quality to be found, so it's just me and whatever gets spat out every month. With that out of the way, grab your hazmat suits, because we're going dumpster diving. When it comes to horror manga, there's probably no name as synonymous with the genre as that of the legendary Junji Ito. This man's been on the scene since the late 80s, pumping out just classics as Uzumaki and Tomoe, alongside countless other short stories, each more terrifying than the last. The man is a certified genius at what he does, and countless people across all corners of the internet have picked his works to pieces just to see what makes them tick. For years, his catalog has offered an enticing goldmine for prospective anime producers and hopeful creators alike. Seems like a no-brainer to at least attempt to adapt Ito's portfolio to animation, though let's just say the last time someone tried it, it didn't exactly go over well. With a prominent adaptation of Uzumaki expected this fall, you can forgive me just a little for letting Netflix's latest attempt to bring Ito's work to life slip through the cracks. I wasn't exactly thrilled to hear that another anthology was being put out after the last one flopped so hard, but I guess the RNG had a different plan for me. To its credit, 2023's Junji Ito Maniac at the very least had the benefit of advertising that Ito himself had picked what works to adapt. The series catalogs 20 of Ito's stories at a rate of 1 to 2 tales per episode, which makes my job difficult since it effectively invalidates any attempt to extrapolate characters and overall direction for a series that resets every episode or so. Wish me luck. The first thing to point out in Maniac's favor is that it does play loosely to the medium it's acting within when it comes to story selection. Compared to 2018's The Junji Ito Collection, the work has a lot less emphasis on so-called money shots. You know, those panels you see plastered all over the internet that sort of beg you to stop reading and take a breather. This means that a lot of the stories, due to their benefit, flow better in animated form, even if the animation itself isn't always great. While it is better than the 2018 series, Maniac's art is kinda bad. Animation is stiff, character designs feel excessively lifeless, and anything that requires a modicum of motion is relegated to CG, sometimes even awkwardly so. Put simply, there's just something about the scratchiness of Ito's line work that doesn't translate well over to this adaptation, and the series suffers for it. Similarly, the writing for the series is fairly lukewarm. The stories that are adapted are short enough to be easily compared to their manga counterparts, and that usually doesn't work in the series' favor. There's definitely some decisions that work better than others though. Episode 3's rendition of the hang balloons, for example, builds much more mystery by not having to say, hey, that's my voice coming from outside my window at the start, immediately flagging something as very wrong. That brings us into one of Maniac's biggest problems, and that is ending its stories. Ito typically leaves you with a punchline to linger on, but the way these works are adapted often just leaves the ending feeling abrupt and unfinished. Not to mention when they straight up truncate things, like with episode 2's rendition of the story of the mysterious tunnel. It leaves Maniac feeling like a passable to subpar adaptation of Ito's work that sacrifices a lot for brief glimpses of something better. Is it better than just going to read the manga? No. Is it leagues better than the Junji Ito collection? You bet. I'll take what wins I can get. You might remember last time I ripped into 2010's Demon King Daimao for having gratuitous fan service that did little more than distract from an otherwise okay story. But what happens if you don't even have that much? 2008's Kanokon is an ecchi rom-com about Kota Oyamada, a young boy who has a fox girl-shaped problem in his life, and her name is Chizuru Minamoto. She wants to ride him something fierce like a dog in heat, and that's the plot. There's also a wolf girl named Nozomu Azumori who is also very much in heat and also wants to ride Kota, and that is still the entire plot. Why is Chizuru like this? Who knows, since the story doesn't give us much information on that front, and is instead more interested in showing things on screen that I certainly can't if I want to keep this video up. Apparently, the guy who did the character designs for the original light novel also did design work for Bofuri, and that is pretty much where any and all interesting facts about the show end. Kanokon is the kind of show that conforms to all of the worst stereotypes people have about anime. It's obscenely horny in the worst way possible, to the point where I had to check multiple times to make sure I hadn't at least secretly pulled up a hentai. It isn't, but with the dub so bad that I had to switch over to the sub for episodes 2 and 3, it might as well be. The plot is so unapologetic in being smut that there is the makings of a sex scene halfway through episode 1, and I can't begin to describe what happens in the bathhouse. My virgin eyes are scarred for life. At least with a typical 2000s harem, there is at least an attempt at a plot. There's usually something to ground our characters and setting in that requires a little more thought than having the only joke in your series being just how thirsty this girl is for her underclassmen. That is not, however, a luxury that Kanokon affords itself, and all that remains is a shell of a series that, despite its voluptuous lead girl, falls as flat as they can. The one saving grace in the show is the class rep Akane Asahina, who does milk a couple decent gags of fruitlessly trying to maintain order in this hormonal cesspit of a series. It's a losing battle, don't bother resisting. I always love me a good supernatural detective story. Some definitely go for a more actiony slant than others, but I love how these kinds of stories use their episodic plots and supernatural swing to explore a wide range of characters and ideas within a single series. It's with that expectation that I walked headlong into 2018's Muhyo Roji's Bureau of Supernatural Investigations, and it does present a lot to like. Episode 1 follows the story of a girl haunted by the ghost of an old friend who jumped in front of a train, and Episode 2 is about a shutterbug whose photos are haunted by a mysterious figure which turns out to be her father. There's a lot of potential there for some really fun writing, and with a series of rules laid out in Episode 1, you've got the making of a half-decent new entry in this little subgenre. The problems really start to present themselves in the finer details, though. Muhyo and Roji's good cop, bad cop mentality can work when done well. However, Muhyo's snide attitude is the exact opposite of endearing, and without that juxtaposition, Roji's overly optimistic and naive perspective can come off as a little too foolish. Dynamic duos live and die by their banter, and unfortunately on that front, the two just don't do it for me, always coming off as a little too forced. There's just a subtle touch that is missing from the overall writing in the show that might not be so bad in isolation, but starts to wear on you the longer you watch. For example, the story of the train station ghost in episode 1 is kind of interesting. The way it's pitched paints a certain ambiguity to the circumstances and the nature of how the former friend died. It's kind of like that one Vocaloid song about Haagen-Dazs, that name I'm not pronouncing, where the narrator ponders the unknowable intent of the victim and, in the case of Muhyo and Roji, then inserts her own guilt into the situation off that. There's plenty of interesting ways to progress from there, but no, it turns out the client was right at the station when her friend killed herself, and what seems like one of the pettiest squabbles I've ever seen, killing all dramatic tension in the process. That degree of blunt writing is present throughout a lot of Muhyo and Roji, and waters down a lot of the stories to the point of almost feeling juvenile. Like, whoa, we don't want to be too serious, that would kill the mood. Fortunately, without that mood, solid characters, or animation, the series falls into the unwanted limbo of lacking a strong identity and feeling almost hand-holdy as if it doesn't take its audience all that seriously. Episode 3 does give us some light into the dark and mysterious backstory of Muhyo, but at that point the damage is already done and asking for 2 seasons worth of my time becomes a tall order. Can't say the same about its MC. Junji Ito Maniac is kinda bad. However, morbid curiosity did get the better of me, and I did see it through to completion. It's far from great, and you'd probably be better off just reading the originals, but from an adaptive standpoint, it's worth poking the still warm corpse to figure out what works and what doesn't. One thing is for certain, it is leagues better than the Junji Ito collection, but if you're looking for an adaptation that does Ito justice, you're gonna be looking for a little while longer. Here's hoping Uzumaki's half decent. With a complete disregard for anything half competent, Kanokon is easily one of the worst things I've ever sat through, and I hope that it stays that way for a good while. 3 episodes in and I'm done, send it back to the fiery recesses of hell. Despite a strong premise and some promising details woven into its story, the 2-car ask was just a little too much for Muhyo and Roji. Where the series should really be reaching its high point, it largely falls flat and just becomes an inoffensive show to watch for the sake of watching. If you're really desperate for a show like this, then there are certainly worse things out there, but for me, this is where I part ways with this one, at least for now. And with that, I hope you enjoyed the video. Do you agree with my assessments? Do you not agree with my assessments? How can I improve this series going forward? Let me know in the comments below, and until next month, remember to stay salty.